Welcome, friends, to Reality Test. What is reality testing, you may ask? Well, it's something we all do every day, maybe with our loved ones over dinner, with coworkers at the water cooler, etc., when we check our subjective or personal emotions, thoughts, and so forth against objective or sort of more agreed upon fact-based reality. Although, because Dr. Ray and I, Dr. Kay, are social constructionists, we don't actually believe there's one true objective reality, but rather our own personal versions of it constructed in the context of relationships. But you get the idea. So here in Reality Test, we're going to be testing the castmate realities and the producer antics of our favorite reality TV shows against what we know as licensed psychologists about the reality out here, off of our TVs. We hope you'll join us as we attempt to reality test. Listen, y'all, we have a lengthy version of our disclaimer in the show description text, also in our old episodes, but we do ethically need to at least include part of it at the start of each episode. So here's our briefest version of the disclaimer. If you've heard it before, you can skip ahead 30 seconds, or for the old episodes, 2 minutes. So although we're licensed psychologists, psychotherapists, supervisors, in the context of our professional roles, we are not acting as therapists in the context of this pod, neither for you nor for the reality castmates we discuss. We will give our opinions as our whole human selves, albeit supported by our psychological knowledge, and we will talk about diagnoses rather than assigning them, as we cannot ethically assign diagnoses without formal psych assessment. But both the opinions and diagnoses we discuss might easily be erroneous, as we don't personally know the folks in reality TV shows. That's it. Thanks, y'all. Now check out our campy theme song.
Are you feeling stressed? Your head's all messed? Well, let's forget all the rest. Fuck it, we're blessed. Cause it's time to talk reality test. Come with us. Let's reality test. Welcome to Reality Test. I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Dr. Kay. Feel free to check in and take a seat wherever you like. Not funny next sentence, which I usually try to go for something just like half formed that I didn't plan that it will just fall out of my mouth. But in this case, this is quite serious, right? That's like sort of my jam. In this case, this is quite serious. We're talking about Real Housewives of New York and their finale because, as was mentioned, this is a dark moment. I don't think we think of it as dark in the same way other people do. And that's sort of where we're coming in with a different angle. And, you know, frankly, I haven't seen anybody else take this perspective. So that's alarming to me, but also could be that this is an interesting podcast episode for you to listen to. So it's also an expansion of the mental health checkup that came out last Saturday. So check that out too if you'd like some additional mental health sort of concepts to go with what we're going to talk about today.
Very well said. Before we get started, one more pleasant thing. We're just going to do some brief check-ins today because this is kind of a different tenor of episode, if you will. I do want to say I went out last night for my birthday.
Woo,
34.
happy birthday. Woo-hoo,
Thank
woo.
you so much. And I met someone. I met their mother, and we were chatting. And she was such a lovely woman. She bought our drinks, which was so nice. She did not have to do that.
So
but she was telling me about her daughter, who also works at this establishment, who used to be a bartender in Charleston for like a number of years. And I was like, I have some questions. I immediately went to Southern Charm because I'm like, I know those boys frequent those bars all the time.
Sure do.
So I was like, tell me, lovely human, did you see Shep, Austin, Craig, etc. at the bars? And she said, yes, I did all the time. And they are just as bad as how they're portrayed on TV. She's like, I don't even think it's an unfair portrayal. Like that is who they are. So she, this waitress bartender had seen much of these men and, seconds Bravo's take on them. She's like, I don't think it's an unfair portrayal at all.
Great news.
So
that's great news.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for your accurate reporting. Bravo on the Southern Charm men. I think you are spot on. And the first thing I thought, I was like, I have to share this on the podcast because this is just hilarious.
Yes. So on target. It's so nice to know that our distaste for how they often are is well planted, deserved.
Absolutely. You got to trust service workers on these things. They see.
Yes. As a prior waitress myself, I definitely think we have the inside scoop often on what people are like. It says a lot about somebody, how they treat the waiter or the server.
Yes.
It says so much. And I think, and the host and the bartender, and the barista, whatever, every level, how you treat people who are working around you says so much about you. So The fact that she felt that they were rude and up themselves says so much. So I love to know that. It definitely reifies how we feel. Did she say anything about how they look?
Oh, yes. She said, she was also like, they're not even attractive. None of them are attractive. Which is interesting. I actually don't think Shep is bad looking. I will give him that. Like, I don't, I'm not like,
I don't mind him
God,
either.
Shep.
Yeah. But Austin is the one where I'm like,
yes. Austin is confusing to me, but she seconded the idea that there are like a lot of women in Charleston and not that many men. So I think men like our Austins get an inflated sense of their attractiveness, which lucky for them, attractiveness is sexy to women, which is unfortunate because I got to say, I think he's confidence is sexy. Unfortunately, I don't think he can really back up his belief in himself, but
no. And I think also I think the height piece helps too, which is like, I've always figured that's what it was about Austin. It's just that he's tall.
Yes, that he's dated all these women and it's tumultuous. And so then it's like it's kind of like the Pete Davidson effect,
Well put, like
it's almost like a status symbol to date Pete Davidson now, which is so interesting.
It is. Although Pete Davidson is also funny AF. And I think humor is a really important characteristic. It's very attractive when somebody can be funny and riff with you. Like, if they can kind of go back and forth with you and riff a little bit, it's so attractive. And I don't see that with Austin. It doesn't mean he doesn't have it, but I just don't see it. Frankly, like, same with Shep. Like, I don't know that he has that either. I don't see, like, the banter. There's no bants. No sexy bants. No. So I'm a pass on that.
Yeah. Craig's not much of a banterer either. And he's a different thing. He's kind of like a petulant child to me. And I think Paige has said as much, but,
I think, I can't remember exactly. I listened to her breakup podcast. I get the sense that they did used to laugh a lot together, which is nice. But I don't know that it's through the bants per se, through banter or really, what it is, frankly. But I do think that laughter is key. And that's something that was missing in my first marriage, that very much in my second marriage, I was like, right, this is what that's supposed to feel like. And it's just so key and a big part of enjoying your life, and having that inner child piece is an aspect of it, but it doesn't need to be the whole thing. Like, we just riff off each other and just go back and forth. Even at like the grocery store, trying to make the grocery store person laugh and just sort of like hitting off each other's jokes to try to see if we can get them to smile. And we just have so much fun with it. It's a joy.
That's adorable.
It's a joy. We started saying, you're taking them down to Price Chopper, because it's the name of our grocery store, Price Chopper. So if we're trying to make somebody laugh, we're like, you're taking them down to Price Chopper, taking them down to where the comedy show is, where we try to make them laugh.
Where you practice your act kind of thing.
Exactly. It's our practice club, comedy club.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
It's a joy.
I use lectures for that. I really try out jokes in that space.
Excellent.
You get some feedback. I can't tell how accurate the feedback is, but you get something. Sometimes
there's a little bit of people pleasing sometimes, funny. But
exactly. Sometimes there's I want to get a good grade in this class, so I'm going to laugh at that joke, which is kind, I guess.
I'll still take that over dead silence, and I guess that is the gift of doing it in class. Is like at the very least you'll get the politically or correct or like the sort of the people pleasing laughs. That's a nice thing. There's no real basement there. Or there's no real floor effect of total silence or like booing or echo crickets or anything. That's so true. Yeah, I like making
you never know. You can get some booing.
Of a different form. Yeah, different
Yes.
form indeed. Exactly. And then negative evaluations, which is not fun, of course, too, if that happens. But no, I think that the humor is a big part, too, I think, of what students enjoy about our classes. So you got to bring humor wherever you go. My clients as well. I'm using, humor when used appropriately and not just like to make fun of something or as a way of like, you don't want to use it defensively to avoid a hard conversation. But if you're using it as a way of in regular old rapport building to sort of like keep it funny, then yeah, it's an appealing quality.
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Sort of kind of adjacent to the laughter part is that I've been watching this alien show from National Geographic.
Ooh.
It's one of those things, you know what I mean? I like sci-fi, but also aliens, there's just like irrefutable proof at this point, so I just don't even want to hear it. Of course they're aliens. So it's like, absolutely. I've actually added that to my like positionality questions, like what are your religions? What are your da-da-da-da? Also, do you believe in aliens? Like, we need to know right up top. What were you doing with that? So,
Damn, that's
right?
amazing.
It says a lot, and I think it's interesting. And I also think, again, the fact that like the Navy has released footage and the Congress, blah, 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 stuff. So anyway, point being, watching a National Geographic show, and they're talking about Dr. Hynek. And Dr. Hynek was this guy from a while ago. He was on a old school reality TV show way back. I forget exactly what it's called, but the whole point is that there's 3 people who pretend to be this certain person, and then the people on the panel have to guess which one of the 3 of it is. And so Dr. Hynek was on there with 2 other people, and they were all 3 pretending to be Dr. Hynek, and they have to answer questions, and then the panel has to guess which one is the right one. So what a weird, what a weird concept, such an interesting early day reality TV show. And the line that the host says at the end is, "Will the real Dr. Hynek please stand up?" So that is what that motherfucking thing is from. Yep. That's where Will the real Slim Shady please stand up is from that show.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That is wild.
Mm-hmm. Easily like 50s. You know what I mean? I guess it was 70s, but it was all black and white. Like it was very early days TV. So it's definitely where Marshall Mathers got his "Will the real Slim Shady please stand up," which I've always just thought was his phrase. Like I didn't even really realize it was from culture. Yeah. I didn't even realize that to begin with, let alone an old school, funny, like reality TV show. So go reality TV. We also had an influence as a field and a culture on Eminem.
Yes. Wow. What a deep cut. Thank you so much for sharing. I have learned something excellent today.
Exactly. It is kind of excellent. I was like, I will take this with me. I'm enjoying this. That
is a fun nugget.
Yeah. And what a nice, treat before we head into the deep, which we will do now as we talk about what happened with Real Housewives of New York. So worth mentioning, even if you don't watch Real Housewives of New York, I really think there is a lot of content here that could be helpful and useful and to be thinking about. So stick around. You might find there's stuff to learn without knowing the characters at play. Again, before we go into as well, I just wanted to share our goals for our Patreon because we're going to try to do that at the top of each episode. And so we talked a lot about on the episode related to Traitors episode 5. You'll hear a little bit more about our spiel on this, but the main point just being that we're at a point where we are losing money by doing this for free, and we don't pay our sound person who's so extraordinary, and we want to keep it afloat. So our goal is that we hope that by 2 weeks from when this episode comes out, and actually, in fact, I don't know when this episode precisely will come out yet. So let me say it instead as by February 10th, if we don't have 20 new members, paid members, but they could be any tier. So tier 1, 2, 2, or 3. If we don't have 20 members, we really are going to try to think about what we're doing next. And, at least cutting down, if not completely stopping, which would be really sad. We even know there have been other psychologist podcasts that have cropped up after us. And so they liked my idea. They liked the idea of psychologists getting in on talking about reality TV. So help us because we are the OGs and we would really love your help to keep us afloat. So that's our first goal. And our second goal is that by this time in a month, which by the time this episode is, I have no clue, but by the 24th of February, we're hoping to have 50 members in order to give our goal, which is $10 to the ACLU every month. And so that is the goal in terms of helping our dark, dark world that we are living in. And we hope to reach that goal so we can give that donation in addition to keeping ourselves afloat. So thank you very much. It's patreon.com/reality test, or you can search using the @ reality test. Thank you. We'll talk about it again at the end of the episode briefly, but let's launch right in. So as background context, I want to share that I cut the notes to just basically when the stuff starts because there is more of an episode before it, and I just skipped right through it because the more important stuff is the real content. So, but what we do need to know from previous episode, or just as context, is that Ubah, who is a tall black supermodel from Somalia, said to Brynn, who is a biracial, white-presenting woman who works in PR, she said to her at one point during a fight, "I don't know if you slept with someone to get this job, meaning this job." And that was on the Sprinter van on the way home from a night out. And that piece really got to Brynn. Sometimes they'll fight and Brynn sort of pretends to be the cool cucumber, but in this case, she stood up and really argued back about it. Aaron, Brynn, and Sai are 3 friends that are old school friends, but have recently sort of recollected themselves because they fell apart as a friendship group. They're sitting by the pool discussing Jessel, who is sort of the outsider of that friend group. And they said that they figured out from Jessel's statement that Pavit, her husband, is not really the love of her life. It's someone else, but she wasn't allowed to be with that person because that person was an Indian. And Jessel and her parents are Indian, and her parents said no go. So They catch themselves, however, talking about Jessel and sort of make fun of themselves for having to gossip in order to feel close to one another. And Brynn tells us that they're back to their old dynamic, which unfortunately necessitated talking shit about Jessel. So the other piece just worth knowing for context is that Aaron ends up telling Jessel that Brynn and Cy, the other two of the triad, had spoken about Jessel, but that she, Aaron, had just sat there while they did. We know for sure that's
Which
not
is
the
not
case.
true.
Yeah, we know the three of them were all talking. So Jessel then confronts Cy and says, well, Aaron told me you two were talking shit. And Cy was like, excuse me? She didn't say that she was also part of this? Let's talk. So that's the context. Take it away for the next piece.
Yes. So early in the evening, Cy pulls Aaron, Brynn, and Jessel into a room to get Aaron to explain to Jessel that Aaron was also talking shit about Jessel, that it was not just Cy and Brynn, as Aaron had previously suggested. Aaron explains that she just spoke up about Cy being upset with Pavit because of what Pavit said about her. What did Pavit say about her again?
He said that she's bipolar. And that she's a bitch, I think. Yeah. And so he even said when asked about it, he like doubled down, like I'd call her a bitch again or whatever, you know. So he was just like really deep in with that. Very ableist, very problematic. But worth mentioning that Cy had also accused Pavit of cheating on Jessel when he would go to Vietnam. So Jessel even said in a testimonial, like, well, I guess it's even because you said this about him. But it's really not, you know, I don't know. They're both problematic, but really the ableism piece is deep because Cy's mom is bipolar.
Right. It was a mean thing for him to say, I think maybe knowingly so. Cy explains that she is still mad at Pavit for what he said about Cy's mental health, and Jessel owns it and apologizes. But like you said, she said to camera that I guess they're even. Then they're all hugging. Yeah, so she's kind of playing both sides there a little bit.
Which is also my first segment because it's about something we thought people would mention the following day because it's important, but they didn't. This is just one part of the two things. One for me is about gossip because they give Brynn a whole lot of shit about gossiping, but they literally, Aaron had a way of turning Cy's confrontation of Aaron into them confronting Jessel, who was the ultimate scapegoat for that trio. So the trio had already scapegoated Jessel to begin with their first gossiping. Then when Cy goes to confront Aaron for backing out of her part in that, all Aaron had to say was, I was just standing up for Cy because she was still upset about Pavit. So then suddenly Cy has to turn to Jessel and explain why she's still upset. And suddenly it became about Jessel defending Pavit and herself. And so then they're hugging and apologizing and crying and happy together. And not another word is mentioned about Aaron. So it's thick scapegoating of Jessel.
Not
and gossip. The other piece about it that's sociopolitical that I thought people would mention too is that gossip is not it's a sexist term because it's been used to pejoratively talk about women's talk. And I try to use the term women's talk in general. They use the term gossiping, which is why I repeat it. And the idea is that patriarchy wants to relegate women's talk to the margins when really, frankly, it's an important source of, for example, whisper networks. And we find out Weinstein people, you know, Me Too was built on it. Figuring out how to identify microaggressions happens in the context of women talking about relationships. So it's just been derogated as like a bad kind of form of talk when in fact it's just the way women focus on relationships, which is healthy and normal. So even though we shouldn't necessarily use it to scapegoat, it is a form of conversation that's actually important. So
absolutely. Very well said.
Thank you.
So another thing that happens is Brynn and Ubah continue the argument from earlier. Brynn is so upset about Ubah saying she sucked dick for her job. Ubah says, I didn't say that. I said slept with. And actually they rolled the tape back. And it seems like Ubah did say something slightly different than what Brynn heard. And Brynn is taking this as meaning that Ubah thinks she didn't say any of it when she just means the sucking dick versus slept with. Ubah leaves. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think this is an important symbol of the fact that like we can rewrite experiences in our head in like a very rapid way. Like, and so Brynn genuinely believed that that's what Ubah said. And no one's calling that out as like she lied, right? Like, because she genuinely believed that's what Ubah said. It's not meant to be a lie. It's just a misremembering. And she feels conviction about it.
Absolutely. Which is very fair. Ubah leaves the room and then Brynn continues yelling and crying. She then says that Ubah is just a dress barn model, no Naomi, no Giselle, which is a mean thing to say and totally unwarranted. Ubah says Naomi wishes, Giselle wishes, which is funny and like a fun quip. Yeah. Brynn continues screaming after Ubah as she leaves the room, calling her a petulant toddler. Raquel then gets up and hugs Brynn after Ubah leaves. And then Raquel, Jenna, and Jessel stay behind. And Brynn asks, why can't a Black woman be successful? Can a Black woman make money? Ubah doesn't say that. What do you mean? Is what one of them says.
No, that was me. I'm sorry. I was like, what do you mean?
Okay.
Like, Ubah clearly doesn't think that about you because she makes money too and she's a Black woman. It was almost like she forgot that Ubah's Black, or like she thinks she's more Black than Ubah, which colorism-wise is not true.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my socio-political moment because of the history of kind of colorism that was discussed on this season. And Brynn kind of saying, oh, can't a Black woman make money? I agree. It's a little confusing because clearly Ubah is a Black woman too, and you are undercutting what she does, which felt shitty and shady for really no reason. So it's already kind of like the fight is going low in a way that I don't think is helpful.
It's not. I totally agree. And the colorism is rampant, and it shows that Brynn is sort of like past the point of sort of like, you know, maybe it's drinking or something, but she's sort of saying things that just genuinely do not make sense and like logically don't make sense. And so this brings us into the controversial events beginning, because she's like really in that place where it's sort of like, whoa. She then is sort of venting to Ubah, to Raquel, Jessel, and Jenna. And she starts like yelling at them. Like she's basically saying, let's go tell your sons. Let's go tell your sons. Let's go tell your son that you sucked dick for your job. She's like, because my future kids are going to watch this. And those three folks have sons who are living and in the world. And I think there's something about that. Like, while that should be seen as the same as her having a future son, if she feels like she's definitely going to have a son, it is actually different. And there's something about like, then they're in a place, it's actually like considered sort of like cognitive, I won't use the word. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is that like takes them somewhere cognitively that they don't need to be taken, and sort of like it's to prove a point. But I think that really sends Raquel over the edge a little bit, because then Raquel finally says, Brynn, stop. Like you're sort of spinning in circles and making yourself more upset by ruminating. And it's true. Like she's making a point, but it still was like sort of like an extra step. So, but the thing is, in my thought, that when Raquel finally says, you know, stop, that Brynn starts to realize she's losing them. Like she no longer has them like fully on board with her. And so then she makes an extra point to sort of like paint Ubah a villain and to see her as the worst between the two of them. And she says she's been in group therapy for sexual assault, and that when Ubah made the comment about Brynn sleeping with a producer for the job, Ubah knew that Brynn had been sexually assaulted. So she says she knew that. This is where I said, you know, therapy. This is where mention of therapy comes up for me, just because she mentioned being in group therapy. I do think that means she's not in individual therapy, or she would have mentioned that. And I do hope she sees an individual therapist. As always, I think we all could benefit, but sexual assault in particular is really pernicious and can really affect your self-esteem, among many things.
Absolutely.
Raquel, Jenna, and Aaron react very strongly. Jenna is even crying during the moment. Raquel cries in her testimonial. Jenna says to us, I cannot imagine that Ubah would make a comment like that, knowing this information. I would imagine that's something sacred and that we wouldn't cross that line. My critique of that is, isn't it sacred anyway? Like, I think implying that a woman slept with someone to have her job is like giving into the patriarchal views of women as being valuable only for their bodies, but also the view of them as they can't be this high in their position unless they slept with someone. Like it's like reifying what the patriarchy already does to us, which is to say that we are not deserving of our positions, that we must have slept with someone to get it. And it reifies what patriarchy does in terms of seeing us only valuable as our bodies. So I actually think it crosses the line anyway. But granted, it is also extra obviously problematic if she knew in particular that. The other issue I have with it, by the way, just really quickly, is that like 70% of women have at least experienced sexual harassment. So sexual violence is 70% of women have experienced something under that umbrella. So you can bet somebody in that room or the victim when she said that comment. So I think that in that way too, it's crossing a line. So absolutely. Raquel says to us that she can't even look at Ubah right now. Raquel makes sure that no one tells Aaron, for example. Like Aaron's like, what's going on? And Jenna's like crying and she's like, what is it? And Raquel was like, it's not ours to tell, which I appreciated. Right. I get the intent behind that. It's not your sexual violence to talk about. So Aaron's still confused though. Jenna, it's one of those moments where you can tell Jenna has a little bit of different social experience and a skill. maybe related to her medical disorders from childhood and so forth. But she sort of says like, oh, like I know I can't tell you, but like, you know, just be good to Brynn. Like that's all I can tell you. Just be good to her. Which is just like, you know, like one of those things where it's like, meh. Yeah, it's like, it's not really like, now you're making it about you being upset and you're like holding this over people. You're saying like, I know, and like all I can tell you is be nice to Brynn. So it just was like a very misplaced reaction, and I think it's something that Raquel probably clocked. But yeah, anyway, she can't explain it, so she just says be nice to Brynn. So this inspires all of them to encourage Ubah to apologize to Brynn, because they can't tell Ubah why they feel this new conviction. So they just channel it into saying, just please talk to Brynn. Like all you have to do is say you're sorry. So Ubah says no. She rejects it at first. And then she finally says, okay, fine. She tries to apologize. Brynn, you could tell right away, was like not into it. But she then had also in her mind already rewritten the comment that Ubah made to be about sucking dick versus slept with someone. So as soon as Ubah said, I'm not going to agree to say that because I didn't say that, all Brynn is hearing is, you didn't say that I slept with someone for the job. Like she's saying, she must be denying all of it. Therefore, this is not a real apology. Therefore, it doesn't count. Therefore, you don't care. Therefore, you're not sorry. So like, it just like, no matter what, Ubah, even if she did try to apologize, it wasn't going to land, because to Brynn, she needed her to say, I'm sorry for saying you sucked dick for the job, when she really didn't say that, nor should she apologize for it. So I think, you know, it was never meant to be that conversation, just given that they were on different pages.
Mm-hmm. From here, the cameras go down. Ubah talks to production. Jessel tells Ubah what Brynn said on camera. Ubah reacts extremely negatively. She's shaking, sobbing. She's shocked. She clearly didn't remember hearing that Brynn was a victim or a survivor of sexual violence. And so she clearly did not know that. And I think even before that, I think we could infer that if she knew that, she would not say something like that. Like she is, I just don't think she's that kind of person. Ubah gets activated and screams a bit, including towards Brynn, where she says that Brynn is a psycho bitch and so forth. So, you know, it gets complicated. Ubah's upset. And I think a part of that too is getting accused of something you didn't do by someone with much lighter skin than you, who is still a Black woman, but it might bring up some of that like racial trauma of like the white woman accusing a Black woman of something, which is just shitty.
Yeah. Totally.
So we don't like to see it. It sucks. And she's feeling upset. Ubah says to camera, I just want Brynn to tell me when she told me that so I can remember before I deny it, which is fair enough. She's genuinely like, if I did say this, I'd love to know because I don't remember that.
It's also a huge deal because it's something where it makes us realize, right, like Brynn hasn't had a moment to tell Ubah what she told the other women about when it was. So no wonder Ubah's just like, I definitely didn't say it. And no wonder Brynn is like, she definitely said it. Because it's like they haven't really had that conversation and they haven't been able to like sit down and talk about it.
Right.
So I really feel like that was a huge moment when Ubah said that. Like, wow, still to this day, because she says that during the testimonial, which is after they were done filming. She still to that day had never heard when she supposedly said it. So
I wonder what would happen or what will happen when both of them watch this. It would be interesting to see. Jessel then says Mount Vesuvius just erupted and I pulled the plug on it. And
which is my
segment.
Yeah. Totally sociopolitical, because there's a long history of people using natural disasters to refer to women's anger in particular, which is hella sexist. I would say also here we're talking a little bit about racism because she's a Black woman, and so we're talking about her being an angry Black woman by talking about her being Mount Vesuvius. And I think in general, this history of referring to women's strong emotions as a natural disaster is literally like pairing it with like destruction and death and loss. And it's like actually totally something we're entitled to and something that men can do, and it's not talked about that way. So it really speaks to the sexism inherent in how we see women's anger.
Absolutely. Yes. Like, I just did this. This is my fault. What's wrong with me? Ubah says, I'm going
that
to kill
too. I meant Mount Vesuvius. No, I meant I meant
Oh.
Mount Vesuvius as the comparison, because using a natural disaster to refer to women's anger is like a way of amplifying women's anger as destructive and like as a bad thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That leads to like death and so forth, because Mount Vesuvius being a volcano, it creates fire. Like she literally sets shit on fire. And also it was not fixable. It like comes out and you can't put it back in. And the other problem with it too is that it is causing death and destruction in a way that we never compare to men's anger. Like there's no like, he's like, you don't say like, oh wow, he came in here like a hurricane. You know what I mean? We say that about women. So it speaks about like women's anger being seen as like destructive in a not okay way.
Absolutely.
But self-blame is also a great point.
Yeah. And Ubah said, I'm going to kill this girl. She said, I knew she was raped. She said that. Raquel said she comes in the room very close to Jenna and starts screaming in Jenna's face. Okay, calm down. What is going on here? She is at the core of her being trying to convince me and make sure I understand that she did not know. Maybe she doesn't remember. Raquel says, Ubah said, may Allah strike me down and kill my firstborn if I did this. And nobody says that if it's not true. So she's like really upset. And like, it seems like it really goes against her values that she would say something like this to someone knowing that information. So I'm very strongly in her corner at this point about whether or not, and I think all the women are, not that it's a verse, but like, I really feel for her in this moment and believe fully that she did not know. That's what I meant by in your corner, to clarify. Not that one's right and one's
Sorry, I like
one's
bug-eyed.
wrong.
Yeah. I was like,
no.
I was like, corner. I think, it makes sense. Like, no, it's really clear she didn't remember, right? Like she was not holding that in her mind. Whether or not she ever heard it is another question. Like, so I also believe Brynn told her, but I don't necessarily know if Ubah even heard it. I don't know if she clocked it at the time and then forgot it, or if she just never even heard it or clocked it. Totally, all of those things are possible. She certainly did not in that moment know it or remember it. For sure, I totally agree. And I think the only reason I like Bug-Eye, just to like share a little bit about that, is I think part of what's damaging about how this is being reacted to is creating those sort of versus models of sort of like either you believe Brynn or you believe Ubah, and certainly everybody is in that way would be taking Ubah's side, right? And that makes sense. I think the danger is even making and taking sides is giving what the patriarchy wants to it by us fighting with each other and creating rifts where you really don't need to be. Because if anything, we're all suffering under the patriarchy. How Brynn is suffering is related to that. How Ubah is suffering is related to that. And both can be true at once. And we can be upset for Ubah and still be worried about Brynn's mental health after sexual violence. And both can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. And one being true doesn't make the other not true, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yes. So from there, Brynn comes down the hallway to Aaron, Raquel, and Jenna and says, is she saying she didn't know? She's saying she didn't know. She didn't know is what Brynn says. Brynn explains it to Aaron, and it sounded something like, and I was raped 3 years ago. And Ubah said, let's go. I'll get a car and I'll come and get you.
So like basically my point only about it sounded like that is like, so Brynn is saying what she said happened on the phone call, and they are showing us through this like camera up in the corner, so it's not well filmed, which also means they don't really know this is going to be used in the show, which says a lot too. But so the other thing I want to point out there is that she said, when she said, is she saying she didn't know? Jenna says, no. Aaron says she's saying she didn't know. Brynn says she didn't know. So that means she's actually like acknowledging maybe she didn't know. Like not just that she's saying she didn't know, maybe she didn't know, which shows us right away that Brynn's open to the possibility that maybe she was wrong, that Ubah knew. And so she then tells Aaron the conversation as a way of being like, no, for real though, this is why I thought she knew. And it does kind of win her over. Like, frankly, Aaron's like, oh, okay, got it. So my segment here was something that I thought this is the other half of something I thought people would mention that the following day that they didn't, because it's super important, but didn't. Brynn essentially disclosed sexual violence to a group of women and then to the public in a very bad way, like re-traumatizing way. She was forced to tell the story quickly in different contexts. We know from giving trauma therapy that that's very unsafe for people to tell their story quickly. It's a re-traumatizing factor. We also know that disclosing a sexual violence story puts you in a vulnerable place. If someone doesn't receive it with care and empathy, you're going to be re-traumatized. So Brynn repeatedly throughout this night, and granted, it's based on a decision she made to use her sexual violence as a point against Ubah. And that was a choice she made that was not great. And she admits that to us in her testimonial. So like she gets that. But regardless, she made that point. So now she's doing this in a way that's really re-traumatizing. And I think the public response is further re-traumatizing for her. Like we're now making it worse by being like, oh my God, she's crazy. Oh my God, she's lying. Oh my God, she's a liar. I think there's a part later we'll talk about too, where the producers double down on that. They do not help her at all. Frankly, we all lie, but that's not what she did. She misremembered and like thought, or just like made an assumption, not even misremembered. She made an assumption that Ubah remembered what she said to her. And that is totally different. And she's being absolutely vilified for it. And in fact, she even brought up early on, like maybe she doesn't know. Like maybe she doesn't know. She told us in her testimonial, I don't know if she knew, but in that moment I thought she knew.
Yes.
So
and was upset and activated and triggered and all the things.
And drinking and exactly. And so I think that matters. I think the fact that she said, in my mind, I knew, and the fact that Ubah said, I wish Brynn could tell me when I said that before I deny it. Brynn very well could tell you when she said it. We never got to see that happen. And then also when we see Aaron tell Ubah later that Brynn said that Ubah might not have clocked it, Ubah doesn't deny that. Ubah's not like, oh, no, it's not that I didn't clock it. She never said it. She doesn't do that because she doesn't know for sure. So I think that all of those point to the fact that, like, really, frankly, Brynn didn't lie. And even if she did, she doesn't deserve the sort of re-traumatization that she's getting as a response to it. Yeah.
While drinking, while put into kind of a corner of, I don't know what to do with this. I'm scared. Yeah. It's so complicated.
And like wanting to be the winner, I think in some ways. Like there's a part of her that wanted to keep Raquel and Jenna on her side, or Raquel and Aaron, and Raquel and Jenna and Jessel on her side. And that's understandable. Granted, she didn't do the best decision for herself there, but she doesn't deserve the rest of this. I mean, she was literally abandoned after she told the story in detail to the whole group of women. So anyway.
It's so sad.
Yeah, it is. It's awful.
Yes. And then Ubah quickly is walking towards Brynn in the hallway. I knew you, psycho bitch, you bitch, she says. Ubah yells down at Brynn, who is escorted to a bedroom by production before Ubah is brought to a hotel, and Jessel accompanies her. So that's also re-traumatizing for Ubah, right?
Yep. Ubah's also deeply traumatized by this.
Yeah, to be removed from a situation and
as the dangerous one.
Exactly, as the aggressor or whatever, which is so harmful and shitty. And I think we were talking a little off mic about this, and I was like, I wonder if that didn't happen, if it would feel this intense the next day, because that was a choice that was made, which escalates it. Now we're in a position where things had to be escalated and people had to be removed.
Yeah. I do think some of that is a guideline. Like Ubah did literally sort of launch at Brynn and was very much in her face. I think part of it is she's taller than Brynn, but if you watch the video closely, she did look pretty defenseless. Like, I mean, the producers kind of had to sort of whoop and scoop in. And I think there is an element of that is absolutely racist and is going to see Ubah as more dangerous because she's Black. Absolutely. And I think also she technically did kind of cross the line of what they see as safe in the production world. And I also think Ubah did okay with that. Like she didn't, you know what I mean? Like I think she also, there have been removals before for other reasons too. So I think it's possible she was able to sort of not see that as quite so much that. But where I think you're also right that it would have been different is that basically reified for Brynn that she was the victim in this scenario. Right. So then when people weren't comforting her at a higher degree, it confused her. And it was further re-traumatizing, frankly, because she was sort of like, wait a minute, don't we all agree that's what's happening here? And no one told her otherwise. No one was like, wait, you also victimized Ubah, which she did, but no one else tells her that. So then she's sort of like, what is happening here?
I'm so confused.
Yes.
Yes. And so now we're on to the next one.
Okay, fabulous. So after Ubah and Jessel leave for the hotel, then there's in quotes, then a whole other event starts. Sai says, so the girls are all sitting in a room except Ubah and Jessel, who are gone, and then Brynn walks in. The only people missing are Jessel and Ubah. She starts telling us the story again. Jenna says it was like a little kid looking for someone to comfort. Makes a lot of sense.
That's what stuck with me, honestly. When I think back on Brynn in that moment, that's what I remember.
Absolutely, yeah. it is, you know, for a reason that it's like that. It's like it is extremely vulnerable to tell and disclose a sexual violence story. She even told us she's only ever really told her brother. She hasn't told anybody this. She doesn't have a therapist. She doesn't have a best friend, she's told. She told her brother, and now she's telling them. And this is like, she doesn't know how sensitive it is, really. You know, she gutturally knows it because she hasn't told anybody, but she doesn't understand the importance of picking your timing and audience and place correctly. And so it just ends up really putting her in a super vulnerable place, especially because they're in different worlds when they go into that conversation. The women just heard Ubah say, "May Allah strike me down if I said that." And Brynn is coming out of feeling victimized by the fact that Ubah ran at her and Ubah got removed. So Brynn is thinking, okay, we all saw how that happened, so everyone's going to be trying to comfort me. And the women are coming in like, wait, is she lying to us? Is she taking us for a ride? So they're all in like missing each other. And it's what a terrible time to bring up. And it's not her fault. Like, of course, she thinks that's what the next step is, really. I think she also felt like she had to prove it, like by telling them the story. I think she thought that's what they needed to be able to believe her, not realizing that what they really didn't believe was that Ubah knew. Not that it didn't happen.
The different. Right.
Yeah. So upsetting. Yes. So she then shares the details of the trauma. Sai ends up asking, did Ubah know? And according to Aaron, the way that Brynn put it was, come to think of it, maybe she didn't clock it. So Raquel says, everything I thought about Brynn changed in a second. I checked out, and the producer says, why did you check out? And she said, because I realized she had lied. And is this my segment, by the way, under trauma, or is that you? I feel like it's lighting up your thing. Okay.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
I think it says Kate Seg.
Yeah, but then when I click on the orange thing, it shows your bubble.
Oh, interesting. You know what I mean? Maybe I had a seg too. Oh,
yeah, it does. It shows you.
Oh,
you click on your previously mentioned. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. This was previously mentioned by you, just this whole Brynn thing, having underprocessed this trauma. And so, of course, it's going to come out in weird ways. And you had mentioned your concern about like her doing this on a reality TV show, you know, that being kind of the space with which she is really talking about her trauma for one of the first times. And this is highly re-traumatizing, this whole situation.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. You know, the reason that we both thought that both of us had a segment is because I did also have a segment on the same exact thing. Oh. And I had put it for if one of our clients said this as a presenting concern, because that is absolutely what I would be going after is the trauma. I would want to intervene around her internalized victim blaming, the re-traumatizing nature of the public disclosure and having it be received so poorly. Like literally our PTSD literature says that if it's a public nature, it's more traumatizing. They also say if there's victim blaming, it's more traumatizing. And she's literally being victim blamed both by the women and by the public and by producers. So by all three.
Yes.
The re-traumatizing nature is compounded by all three of those elements. And then there's also the piece of self-blame because she does feel like her memory is sketchy because it is sketchy, but she's realizing her memory kind of betrayed her there. With trauma, your memory betrays you all the time, but also when you're drinking, it does. And then beyond that, our memories are literally fallible, period, end of story. There's a reason that confessions are no longer a big thing in court because our memories are wired to be self-serving. So anytime you remember something, just the fact that you're pulling it up in that moment and with that person affects what the memory is. It will change depending on who you're telling and why and when. So that tells you right there it's fallible. That's why we're both social constructionists. Because we're like, there is no one true reality because we all don't remember it anyway. You can't. So we're all in our own reality. There's also
you can talk to someone after a situation and the two of you will have different understandings of what happened based on your own identities, experiences, you know, defenses, whatever it may be. It's just all so variable. But sorry,
exactly. And they blame Brynn for that kind of shit when it's like, that's just human. That's like a human thing. Like she has a different memory than you. Correct. You know? And I think if you're talking to someone that you really like, you might change your memory to suit how they're remembering it. And so then you don't think they're lying. But if it's someone you get mad at because they're saying something you don't like, you're going to be like, that's not true. Right. So like, there's that piece too. You'll co-construct it with people that you like and don't like in different ways. So there's also a common core belief that everybody knows, and it's a safety type of core belief with trauma where it's like, it's safer to believe everybody knows what happened to me because then it's better than getting caught off guard if someone mentions it and I'm not prepared for it. So the fact she told Ubah, it's not surprising that she needed to remember it as Ubah knows because that's a safety issue, not just that she told her. There's also the piece about her sexualized behavior, her speech and her clothing. Everyone's like getting on her about that. She learned this as a way to feel powerful in a place of total lack of power. So like learning it's a way to get, you know, Russian billionaires to help when she grew up with nothing. Learning that women's bodies are seen as the only thing that's valuable about them. learning also that through the sexual violence and childhood violence that she experienced first, she is missing red flags at this point, right? Like that's something that happens with folks who experience sexual violence trauma, because actually they, in a small way, subconsciously recreate the conditions of what happened, hoping they'll beat it this time, because that sense of mastery over the situation can be healing and corrective. The problem is that is built on a belief that it's your fault. So if you believe it's your fault, you believe you can change it the next time. The truth is it's usually out of your hands. And so if you're recreating the conditions, it will happen again, because it wasn't actually your fault, and it will be sexual violence again. So that's scary, and frankly, something to think about with her sexualization and people seeing that as like her fault, because that will add to it. The other thing is that we get stuck at the age of our first big trauma, and so her baby voice might be a result of the fact that her first big trauma was when she was a baby. It could also be sexualization of the infantilization of women, which is gross, but has to do with that as well, that she sees that as sexy because men see that as sexy as a way for getting at the infant, sort of their weird thing about children, and having it be like okay because it's with an adult woman. So that's a big piece. And the last piece I would want to talk about with her is the compartmentalization. The fact she was okay the next day makes sense in 30 different ways to me. One, just basic level, is the compartmentalization as a safety strategy as well for people with sexual violence. If you went through your whole day every day thinking about what happened to you, you would never get through the day. You'd be in bed all day. So you have to compartmentalize. The other thing is she genuinely believes, I bet, that people think that she's playing the victim. And so she probably thought, if I go into tomorrow morning acting like I'm so weak and I'm such a victim, people are going to not give me the comfort I need, because we have this weird idea where if people ask for attention, they don't deserve it. Actually, if someone's asking for attention, they need attention. So like, actually, if she's struggling and acting like a victim, it's because she's a victim and she needs help. So she doesn't, but she would see that as something people would see as like not giving her help. So she came in looking stronger. And actually, Sai did kind of give her a little bit of support. So anyway, point being, there's 100 reasons why that would happen. Instead, people are shitting on her for that too, and seeing that as meaning she must be crazy. She must not realize what happened. She doesn't care. Wild. So just those things I would want to address with her, so she didn't blame herself for those, because that's what everyone else is doing.
Absolutely. Oh, shoot. I lost my place. I think I'm next.
Oh, no. I think I'm still talking.
Oh, my bad. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all good. So Sai asks, did Ubah know? Apparently not. Raquel, everything I thought about changed a second. Silence. So then Sai says, let's go to bed. Brynn leaves, but then Sai gets up and sort of does this like little dance motion thing, like, what the fuck? Because they're all thinking about what Brynn said about, well, maybe she didn't clock it. So then they're all whispering. And imagine from Brynn's perspective, she just disclosed the sexual violence to this whole room of people. They said, let's go to bed. She leaves. Wouldn't someone follow her and comfort her? Normally.
Right.
So the fact no one did, and they're whispering, of course she comes back and sort of like, what's going on? But instead, when she comes back in, Sai is narrating to us, well, of course she came back in because she's checking the temperature, and she realized that she overplayed her hand. She played her hand in front of all of us. It's like she came back in because she's like, what's going on? Why aren't you all coming with me or coming to bed? Because you said you were. And so like now she's realizing, now she's realizing that her disclosure was completely met with abandonment and completely met with people either not believing her in some way, which she doesn't fully clock on or understand why that feels that way, or whatever it is. And that is right there where her fight or flight is deep in play.
Oh, heartbreaking. So the next morning, Brynn is speaking with production on the couches. Kind of everything looks chummy. And the Bravo title card said the next morning production sat with Brynn to make sure she was okay.
I have an issue with this. Can I say real quick? Because fuck that. Because like if you look at their body language, the three producers were sitting like near each other over here, and Brynn was sitting over here. But even the one who was on the edge of that group had their legs facing the group, not her. They didn't like come in and sit with her. They act like they like can't, you know what I mean? Like no way. If you come in and sit with her, that looks totally different. They were sitting, and she came and sat on this couch. She sat with them. And the reason the cameras weren't up yet is because they come up when people start packing or when they start doing a thing. Like usually the last day, we just see people packing. So no shit, they didn't have the cameras up yet. They weren't doing anything yet. People were still sleeping.
Right. So they probably weren't even, it might be like a legal thing that they said that or something.
Yeah, or just make themselves look good. Know. Yeah. Or like make themselves look good, or like have an excuse for why they're showing this footage or whatever. Like I definitely think they made themselves out to look better than they were and throughout this sort of experience here.
Oof. And Sai said Brynn was acting like nothing happened. Jenna said, I think kind of empathically, that's her coping, wanting everything to be better. And
I skipped over one of my
I'm so sorry.
Real quick. No, that's totally fine.
Sorry.
Oh, that's totally fine. So the piece about like when the next day or whatever and what you're doing, I think I had put that under 6. So that was right. The lack of comforting her following her disclosure is a big part, and how Sai was narrating the night is a big part of where the producers, not being psychologists, fell flat on its face and like fucked us all over, because they should have been using different footage from the narration. They should have been using different footage from Brynn, and instead they landed very much in the camp of let's re-traumatize and victim blame her with the women and what they're doing. So if psychologists were producers were psychologists, they would have had a more trauma-sensitive approach.
Absolutely. As opposed to this will make our show look better if we kind of pin this on this person or make it that verse sort of narrative.
Yeah. And like to promote Sai being like, oh, she acted like nothing happened. And like, oh, what do you mean? Like, but if you really pay attention to her conversation with Sai, she's not doing any of what Sai says she's doing. So it's just weird.
That's Sai's memory or attentional bias at play.
Exactly.
And who the fuck knows? Maybe Brynn thinks I have to go back to being charming and okay to not get abandoned. Who knows what's going on in her head?
Exactly. What I was saying earlier too about how like she thinks that if she acts like the victim, people are going to abandon her. So that's why she has to act fine. But the truth is she didn't act fine. The first thing she said to Sai was, I have a car coming. She's saying I'm leaving. So like she did not act like everything's fine. She did not act like nothing happened. Sai said she acts like nothing happened. Really? Because the first thing she said was I have a car coming. So like that's not nothing. Yeah.
Ugh. So yeah, Jenna was saying this is her coping, wanting everything to be better. The best I can do for myself is pretend like it didn't happen. And maybe that was a part of how Brynn felt. Who knows? But I think that was a good strategy or a good way to think, okay, if I were in Brynn's shoes, how would I feel? So
she really
I
did some perspective taking. Yeah. Very empathetic.
It was good. Sai asked her if she's feeling better than yesterday, which Brynn...
She's giving her the comfort. That's her giving comfort, which is like the thing that like no wonder she thought, like, you know what I mean? Like you're giving her the comfort that she thought that she would get from not overreacting or not being a victim. So like you're actually giving her the thing that you're then like, how come she didn't? It's like, well, you gave her the comfort that showed her that what she was doing was right. So no wonder she kept that strategy.
Right. She was continuing to use it. Oh, no, I love it. Brynn explains that she realizes they need to just film today and get that over. So then she felt a little more confident and was like, maybe like I can do this. Who knows? But was also trying to just get through the show and be a professional. And then they can discuss everything later.
Which shows she knows it's not over. It shows she knows something happened because she's like, after we film, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. And Sai says, so just try to have a super fun day. Was that in the confessional or
no? So she said, Brynn. Can I explain this just real quick? Because I was so annoyed by this. Basically, Sai says to Brynn, so just try to have a super fun day. And Brynn says back, well, just try to have a fun day, right? And like Sai says to us, what do you mean? As if Brynn had been like, we can just try to have a fun day. Or like as if she had been like the one to initiate that idea that like, it's okay, like forget last night, we'll just try to have a fun day. Actually, Sai was the first one to say it. And she said a super fun day. So Brynn saying just try to have a fun day was actually taking it down a notch. Like it was actually her being like, actually, it's going to be hard to even have a fun day, but we could just try to have that, let alone a super fun day. So I just was like kind of surprised by how, like when you first watch that, it looks like Sai is saying to her, like, how could you possibly think we could do that? It's like she doesn't. That's why she's sort of like, well, we can try to have a fun day, not a super,
Right. Yeah. Trying to manage expectations, but also be like, communicate. I'm going to try to move forward today and keep making the show kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, because they're expected to. Exactly.
Right.
Which is also her way of being like, I'm strong enough to do this, like she even said I'm psycho, which is some self ableism, but she said I'm psycho like that. I can just do a 180 the next day and pretend like everything's fine. She's trying to say that to be like, don't worry, we can just do this right now, but it's not fine. I'm not fine, but I can do this just so we can get through the day and get the fuck out of here. Because I know if I make it about me, we'll be here all day.
Right. And it'll go on and on. Brynn says to Sai, I think I just need to leave. She leaves, hugging everyone who is comforting towards her. We know everyone treated her that way because Erin says during filming of the opening credits, when she refers to this whole thing about production and says, maybe she's figuring it out, meaning figuring out that it was a much bigger deal. than they like led her to believe. And production cuts the day short and everyone is packing. But then she leaves and all the women talk about her.
Yeah, she's sort of leaving them all there to talk about her. I would also say, like, my only point about that was, like, with Aaron later being like, well, it's maybe she's realizing all this, is like, then we realize, oh, wait, they never voiced this to her. They never told Brynn that they were like, why didn't you tell Ubah or whatever? So they just sat on all these feelings about Brynn and she had no idea. So she's thinking all of this is about her trauma. Like, ugh, so sad.
It just was such a mess.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, it's like not on Ubah at all. And it's not on Brynn at all. You know, it's like really the other women's handling of it that's just like tough to watch a little bit. And it's not their fault either. They're doing the best they can with the reaction they had and the context, but it's tough.
Right.
So debrief on the patio. They're out there talking. It starts with Erin saying she's unwell about the whole thing. She's like, I just feel unwell. Jenna says, well, we can all agree it's clear Ubah didn't know. Everyone does agree. Jenna says to the group, I feel a little taken advantage of, and everyone agrees with that. That's a really dark thing to say about somebody telling you about being taken advantage of sexually. Sai says it's a big meaning like, we've known this about Brynn, or like, duh, or like, yeah, we told you. So you have a segment here if you want to talk about the next one.
Yes. Aaron then said something about, I believe something happened to Brynn. So something, not sexual assault. Mm-hmm. It's like a downplaying. Mm-hmm. I would never not believe women. That being said, which is such a thing to say, Brynn has a lot history of taking a comment from off camera, flipping it, reversing it, and turning it into something else. So my thing here is, I think there needs to be a distinction made between maybe Brynn embellishes sometimes or misremembers or whatever the fuck it is, and what the fuck happened to her, which is real. And by the way, people misremember, embellish for all sorts of reasons. And that does not mean that they are lying. And I feel like that's what is being like played with here or intimated by producers. Like, can we believe that this even happened? Which is so fucked up. It's unbelievable. And then as we talked about off mic, Dr. Kay, and you've said, is like, it doesn't mean that everything Brynn has ever said is a lie. That sort of black and white thinking is incredibly problematic and not whole object thinking about a person. Like, oh, she's just a villain, which is so untrue. Brynn is a complicated, vivacious, nuanced human being, as we all are. And so I just think that wasn't so well played in this episode.
No, because as we'll know in a second too, like also production doubled down with Aaron about that and gave a bunch of examples of Brynn, quote unquote, lying that were not real examples of Brynn lying. She's not lying in any of them. And some of them she embellishes, but she's not lying in any of them. But before that, even I just wanted to add to what you said, that like also Aaron saying, I believe something happened. Something you're right is bullshit. Also other people say, I'm not doubting her experience. Her experience? What do you mean? Or sexual violence? Like, are you kidding? That's not an experience. That acts like it's positive. And then also something happened. I agree, not naming what it is, sexual violence. But then she says, also, I would never, ever not believe a woman. So, like, that's why you believe it? It's not because you believe Brynn wouldn't lie to you about something like that. It's not because of that. It's just because you would always believe women. You know? Yep. So, like, again, it reifies that same idea that, like, oh, but she's a liar, though. But she's a liar. So then the castmates refer to Brynn as lying again, like implying that's again, because then Aaron turns to Jenna and goes, now do you believe I didn't call you poor? They laugh. And then Raquel says to Aaron, or that she was in on the praying. What? Like both? She has said, and Aaron has admitted that Brynn knew about half of the prank. And we know that because ironically, Brynn told Ubah, of all people. She's the one who told Ubah about the prank before everyone else told them about it. So we have to know for sure that she knew. That's not a question. That's not a lie. That's not a question. She knew. The other thing is about the calling her poor. Aaron admitted to camera that she was frustrated with Jenna for not paying for the Uber. And all Brynn did was pick up on that emotion that was underneath the joke that Aaron told. All Aaron said that Brynn was lying about was it was a joke. She says, I did say something, but it was a joke. And Brynn is making it sound like I was upset, but it was just a joke. No, Brynn picked up on your underlying emotion. She didn't lie. She just picked up on what was actually there, and you're pissed because you didn't want to say that because you joked so that it wouldn't come out as frustration, because then you would have to admit that you were frustrated with Jenna and you didn't want Jenna to know that. So you're pissed at Brynn for calling you out for what you actually did. Voice.
Right. Exactly. So not okay, not cool. And with all of these like Brynn's a liar things, I was thinking to myself in terms of like who needs therapy. This group of women need group therapy because there is a dynamic happening right now where they are all getting closer because of their shared kind of villainization of this one person. I think like some sort of interpersonal process group would be really good to kind of play out some of these dynamics and work on whole object thinking, perspective taking, because I don't think there's a lot of perspective taking that a lot of these women have. Like, okay, where might she be coming from? Oh no, she's just lying because she's a liar and she manipulates, and that's what's happening. It's like, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think they would really benefit from some group therapy to understand each other a little more.
Yes. And that would also help with the Ubah-Brynn dynamic, because if they had spoken with each other, this could have gone totally differently. And
absolutely.
I really think that you're so right, because a lot of it's coming from Sai. I think a lot of Sai's languaging around it, and she has a lot of power in this group. Like, she'll say something small and it just goes for days. You know, like the comment she makes like affects everybody's view on it. And I think that's really dangerous, the way that she's wielding it, because as soon as she had a chance to go against Brynn, or, you know, same thing with anybody else she doesn't like, as soon as she gets a chance to go against them, she's going to. Same thing happened the night at the bar with Brynn, but Sai overplayed her hand by getting angry. Right. And so then everyone saw it as Sai's problem. But if she had just sat there still and said what she said about Brynn, she would have landed her point. And that's what she's doing now. She's showing her therapy by not yelling and screaming. So then her points are really landing, and it's actually not great, because her points are still anti-Brynn, because she's still mad at Brynn about all their other shit, you know? So yeah, it's landing. Production joins the women in their lambasting of Brynn as a liar by sharing all of these this montage. To me, the montage was like, what a reminder that she hasn't lied. Like, for me, I was like, nope, wasn't a lie. Nope, wasn't a lie. Nope, wasn't a lie. And in the podcast I've listened to since then, they're like, wow, that montage like really shows you how manipulative, how much of a liar she is. Or I listened to one podcast and I saw a TikTok video. It's only those two things, but both of them did that. And I just sort of was like, really? Because I felt like the montage was like, wait, you know, I don't think production meant to be. I knew production meant for it to look like she was lying. I knew that. But like in my head, I was like, good reminder, they're not lies. So the example just really quickly was the thing about the cheese and saying that, you know, that's weird about the cheese. But Brynn even says at the beginning of that scene, this is my interpretation of what Aaron said. So she's even saying my interpretation, not the whole thing. Aaron thinking it's weird Pavic didn't wear his wedding ring, telling Ubah she got a man in Connecticut, which was true. Aaron saying that Jenna is having money problems. We already talked about that. And then, okay, I'll be in it with you about the prank she was in on. We talked about that. So then Aaron says to the camera, I believe the truth always comes out. So right away, we're put in this position where we're like, oh, we're seeking the truth. Like, will we find it out? Yeah, exactly. Like it paints her as a villain. Sai says she changes the situation to work in her favor, and she says it in a way that makes it so believable that people take her side. Really? Is it just her? Because I'm pretty sure that's what like all humans do. We always want people to take our side. That's a human thing. We're going to change things in our favor. Yeah. Silly.
Yeah.
I think that was a segment.
And Sai does it too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Yeah, say more about that. So true.
And well, you were just talking about how she wields power in this group. And I think that's because of the way she says things and how she can communicate. People really take her side. And it's like you said, all humans do that. It is a normal human impulse to want to be connected with and believed. That doesn't make Brynn a bad person.
No, exactly. It's a human thing. We all do it. Sai certainly does it. And I totally agree. Raquel then says, well, we have the main titles in a couple days. What are we going to do? And Aaron says we have to get through it. And this is a good reminder that that's what Brynn has been talking about too, where she's like, we just need to do this and we can talk about it later. There is an attitude of like, we have to film, period, end of story. So like, we have to do it and we can talk later. We have to do it. So that's a problem. That says a lot about how the production really makes them feel stuck, and it is re-traumatizing.
Right.
Oh, good.
And it would be nice if the conversations could be a part of the show. Like they could have that be a part of what they're doing, as opposed to we have to stuff this for later kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like, actually, this could be now if you were better at taking care of them when they do it. If you could take care of them, they might share more with you now instead of saying, let's just film and get out.
No.
So then Jenna said, she went on about the story. I believe her. I can believe that Ubah did not know. Did Brynn actually tell her and she didn't clock it? Or did she not even tell her? To me, that's not a question. To Jenna, that was a question as well, worth mentioning. Sai says, I do not doubt something horrific happened to Brynn. She probably lied so much as a child to cover up that it bleeds into her adulthood. Again, really, really ableist, gross language about Brynn, who had experienced trauma. These are things that happened in her childhood that influenced how she is today. Not because she was covering it up, because she was trying to feel power in a place where she was completely powerless, had no control as a child. And lying actually is a form of grabbing power because you feel in control of the moment by deciding what this other person knows. So you are in control. So that's the only way sometimes kids can feel power. It's actually a normal part of childhood is to lie. There's a time where they learn how that's powerful. Granted, if people learn that lying is not what you need to be able to feel powerful and there's other ways of feeling powerful, you learn to not lie. But you don't learn to not lie if you never learn there's other forms of power. So Brynn, if she did lie, we would suggest actually it's because she feels that much more powerless now today. But she doesn't lie. Yeah. She's just exaggerating. So
right.
Frustrating.
Different
yeah,
thing.
Different things, friends. So then Sai says to the group, she's going to be calling you two the most. She's going to try to rectify the situation. So she's already narrating, preempting, so that anything that Brynn does is going to be seen through that lens. So then Aaron says, well, she texted me. She said, are you getting out of there today? Immediately Raquel says she's concerned that we're staying without her. And she says to the camera, I've seen this before. It's like narcissism 101. Ableism. My first thought was like, how about trauma 101? How about the fact that if anything that's more closely aligns with BPD, and that means it's trauma,
Right.
She said she was worried about herself, not about the madness she just unleashed on us. Ableism, using madness as a form of like saying, that's literally like a same thing as saying insanity or crazy. Like, and then she goes, she's not worried about whether Ubah was okay. That's not of concern. We don't know that. And then Raquel said, how could Ubah? Then Raquel, this is the other thing that was like, the ableism. Raquel goes, how could Ubah explain it to Mr. Connecticut without him thinking that she too could potentially be crazy? So that means you're saying Brynn is crazy. Like that's a necessity. We all know Brynn's crazy, but is Ubah crazy too? So Raquel with the neuropsychologist's wife, bummer.
I had a segment here. I do too.
Yeah.
I actually put it later. I wonder if maybe this was said twice or something, but I put this here. I thought maybe people would be talking about this the next day or something because that this would be talked about more. Cause I'm like, wait, what is going on in their dynamic? Because wasn't it also said that Ubah was worried that Mr. Connecticut might think that?
We've heard this for a while now. There's like a weird thing with Ubah. That's why she didn't want him to come out as a thing. Like she didn't want people to know she had Mr. Connecticut because he's very private. And it sounds like he's a lot like Todd. Like I think he's like Todd where he's like in control of like what people know about him. And also like they worry that he'll see her as an angry Black woman and want to dump her. Like, so that's like something people are collectively worrying about for Ubah. It's very gross on his part.
It feels racist and
very
weird.
Racist.
And like, oh, if you show your full self, this white man in Connecticut's not going to want you anymore. That's a weird fucking thing to say. I don't know. Maybe because
Ubah says that too. Like Ubah feels that way. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know if that's him, if that's like internalized racism, if it's a combination of the two. I have no fucking idea, but I thought that was weird and I didn't like it.
It sucks. It's very much also him either way. It sounds like he's definitely a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I totally see that down there too. Good catch. Okay. You return.
Oh, yes, I am up. So Jessel and Ubah return. So the girls are saying as Jessel comes out, she has issues. She needs to talk to someone. They're asking how Jessel is. She said tired, but and then they ask if Ubah's okay. She's crying. Raquel yelled at Jessel last night, so she's apologizing to her in tears for yelling at each other. Jessel says it's okay and that she is sorry. And everyone's comforting Ubah, and I'm sorry for everyone assuming that was true. And like very fair, and a fair apology, absolutely, because that was really hard for Ubah and would super traumatizing.
Well, also Aaron says, I'm sorry for even assuming that was true. To be fair, which actually I think is good. Like she doesn't apologize for everyone assuming because it's not really her place, but she says, I'm sorry for even assuming. Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I think that's very appropriate. And sweet Ubah was like still at this point, like absolutely terrified, that she was going to get in there and everyone was going to be like, what did you say? Like,
Yeah, poor Ubah. And then she said, I'm worried to go back to last night. And Jenna said, we don't need to repeat it, but you need to know one thing. We all believe that you didn't know.
Yeah.
And Erin said, yeah, she said that when she called you to tell you about something going on, that she had said it, but that maybe you didn't clock it. And Jenna said, yeah. And I also think, like, if you had clocked it, I'm sure you would have circled back and said, let's talk about this. Ubah did not disagree. And that's a serious possibility. Like, she could have, sometimes on the phone too, you're distracted or you misunderstand what someone says. Like, it is an easy mistake to understand or miss between these two women.
Absolutely. Also, there's the language piece. And then the other thing I just want to say too is like the idea of, or this is in the opposite direction, but Jenna saying, yeah, I feel like you must not have clocked it because if you did, you would have circled back to it. I can see where from Brynn's perspective, that's not necessarily the data point it sounds like it would be, because when you've been through sexual violence, you know that people have a really hard time talking about it. And maybe it's also because Ubah, like Brynn might be thinking Ubah has seen this in Somalia, and so she doesn't want to talk about it because it's triggering. Like, there could be any number of reasons why, understandably, Brynn might have assumed, well, even if she did hear me, she wouldn't bring it up. And so I don't want to totally agree with Jenna that that's like what that would mean, because we don't know that. And I think I could see where Brynn wouldn't think of that as a data point per se either.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Ubah said, the fact that there's people you heard, the three of you were out there believing that I knew this, and she's trying to leverage how I said she slept with someone. She's trying to leverage this against me. And multiple women said there's no doubt in our minds that she was trying to leverage or whatever. Ubah said to camera, I'm just grateful they've seen it with their own eyes and are strong enough that they have integrity, and that they didn't just take Brynn's side because they like Brynn. So I think she felt heard and seen by that.
Thank goodness too. That's great.
Yeah, totally. Sai realized that it had gone too far.
She says this about Brynn, and this is actually my point of contention, because up till now I'm like, yes, great, what great solidarity. But as soon as Sai starts going into this, I'm like, oh no, now we're back into the ableism around Brynn. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, definitely. And like the group think of, we're all okay. This person's the bad object. And we can come together over that. But yeah, go back to, I'm sorry if you had more.
Oh, no. I was giving it back to you because because Sai says she realized it had gone too far. Like when she uses that kind of language, it's sort of like, that's such language around like seeing her as manipulative. Like you use that language of like, she sees it's gone too far. That's saying like she's like a game master, like she's, manipulating the situation. She's seen it's gone too far. Like, oh no, it's like she's lost control of the situation. It's just so, it's like, it's little things like that where you would think of that as not necessarily victim blaming. It's extremely victim blaming. It's like very much that. It's very much seeing her as manipulative game master. It's just like really problematic, and it sucks because it's that kind of thing where she won't get blamed for that, but that language was damaging.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Ugh. And let's see. Jenna said, it all lies on whether Brynn really thought Ubah knew. It's probably one of the most delicate situations we've been in. Sure. Jessel, is Brynn an awful person? No, but so much has happened. I don't know if it'll ever be the same. I think this situation was hard in a lot of ways. And of course, they are this is a rupture, and they will hopefully grow from it. I do think people in this situation are making it like we can't recover. It's almost like we can't recover from this thing, which I find a little confusing. Personally.
I heard this on a podcast too. I heard this on the podcast too, where someone was saying, like, I don't see, at least, so someone said, I don't know if this franchise can continue. I don't agree with that. Another person said, I don't know if the friendships can continue. Maybe, but I think that us seeing it that way is part of it's part of the victim blaming. It's part of us saying like, Brynn has gone too far. She's a bridge too far. There's no way we can come back from this. It's like, actually, I think the like fans should really look at like, can we come back from this? Because I think how we've reacted to it is really the more damaging thing. And I would say that about the other women as well, but not Brynn or Ubah.
And more telling. I also think there's been this narrative of, we missed the old Real Housewives group. And so people are kind of looking for a way to bring this franchise down to return these, although entertaining to watch, very problematic white women who were a part of the old Real Housewives of New York. I've seen enough content of that ilk that I believe it to be true. And so are people just looking for something like that? I don't know.
Yeah. Instead, this forces them to be really critically minded about some serious conversations like colorism that's more nuanced and sexual violence. And I think it's worth mentioning, sort of, Jason, what you're saying, that like, even though I think we as an audience need to look at how we're reacting, it is also still a microcosm of society. It's not our fault, right? Like, the reaction that happened from the audience to be blaming Brynn is both the way production made it to be, and it's how society told these women to react. So none of this is anybody's fault. There's no real blame here.
No.
The point is that, can we do better? And I think we can. And I think we can see this
Absolutely.
differently, and that's a part of doing it better. So I'll even just jump right in here with the opening credits here, because they go then to jump ahead to filming the opening credits. And I just want to make sure I hit up. My last point was something we've mentioned earlier. And I think I already went past it. So I'll bring it up now, actually. So I went past my last one. The last one is, this is something we mentioned previously. This is something we talked about with you a while ago, about this idea that Brynn does this thing when she's repeating a story where she hits on the underlying emotion. I brought this up earlier in our conversation as well, tonight as well, but it's also a previous pod. She's not lying. She's like actually doing something more skilled, where she's like picking up on the emotion underneath what's being said. And that pisses people off, because they're like, wait, there's a reason that was unspoken. That was unspoken because I didn't want to say that. Like, and so she's picking up on this thing. But the thing is, because she has, trauma brain, or because it's just like a part of how she's functioning, she only remembers that part. So if she was able to say, I noticed that Aaron was joking about Jenna being poor, but she also had this other part of her that was not joking. Like, clearly she was also upset. If she'd been able to say that, there was no denying that. No way Aaron could deny that, But she doesn't. She doubles down on like, no, she wasn't joking. And she's not wrong. Like, she kind of wasn't joking, but she was kind of joking, enough joking that Jessel had to admit maybe Aaron was joking. So it's like this kind of thing where it is almost more attuned than telling the truth, if you will, or like than telling what's on the face of it. But it gets seen as very much lying, and that's such a bummer. And I think it speaks to like also trauma safety, because what you need to know as someone who's had trauma is, what is the real feeling? Not like, what are you telling me? I don't need to know what you're telling me. I need to know what's underneath it. I need to know if you're going to hit me later tonight. I need to know if you're drunk. I need to know, so like, I need to know not what's being said. And that's the thing, is she learned how to pick up on the underlying energy, because that's actually related to safety, not what someone's saying. So
the latent content, if you will.
The latent, not the manifest. Exactly. So she's picking up on the piece that's actually more key for safety. And so like, what a bummer that she's being punished for it. It's a bummer. Yeah. I dislike it. Ugh. So, there's that piece. That's my final piece from the segments. But the final section as well from the notes, we skip ahead to where they're filming the opening credits, which is how we started the whole season, was a scene of them doing this. And by the way, when I watched them doing this, I looked at the opening materials and I thought, who looks upset? Who looks upset? And the only person I thought looked upset was Brynn. So kind of makes sense. Aaron says to Jenna, she points to sort of everything or everyone and says maybe she's realizing, meaning like maybe she's realizing how serious this is, and that they were not telling her how rude, really frankly, they were behind closed doors about Brynn. Ubah says to us, I can't talk to Brynn because I worry she'll come apologize for something else and overlook everything else. And I would not be held responsible for anything after that. Unfortunately, she would be held responsible for whatever happened after that. But I get your point. She shouldn't be held responsible. Right, is her point. Her point is I shouldn't be held responsible because at that point, it's not my fault. But it is, and you can't do violent things. So, but I get her point. She's like, this is it. I can't take it after that. So then Brynn comes super late. She has a half hour. Production says you have a half hour. She doesn't want to be mic'd. Brynn says to everybody, hey. Brynn tells us it's just a weird vibe, awkward, but it's work. We got to do it. Suck it up, whatever. Then Ubah says to us, I can't even hate Brynn. Like, if I hold this grudge for her, she would clip my wings. So I have to forgive her for me to move on and for me to live my life. Brynn, it was so moving. So sad, so moving. Definitely, tearful in watching that. Brynn says to us, Ubah doesn't even seem bothered, but I'm over here like I want to die inside. The apple falls and someone's like, I'll get it. And it looks to her like, really, these girls don't give a fuck. They don't seem to care. Yeah. So then we start seeing these like title cards that go up next to the women. So like next to Brynn, it says Brynn spent time in France and swears she's done stirring the pot. Here's the other narrative that's so dangerous about Brynn. Yeah. She's doing all of this to stir the pot. And poor sweet Brynn has done the like little like motion of she's stirring the pot. And right, is that projective identification? Is that her falling for the thing that's put on her? Or is that something that like, right, she owns? Is that the same thing as lying or misleading them about Ubah? No, that's not what she was doing. She was not stirring the pot during that. So this is dangerous territory from Bravo. Didn't like it. Jenna or Aaron, I honestly can't remember, but one of them said, I just want Brynn to be okay, just because I don't agree with what she did. What did she do? What did she do? Misunderstand? Misremember? Okay, fine. Because I don't agree with what she did doesn't mean I don't care about her. I think she made a mistake. I think there's a path for all of us if Brynn can really own this. How is she going to own this? Not one of you sat down with her and said, here's what this looks like, what's going on. Not one of you. She has no idea. She has no idea what's going on. And to her, you've actually been the one to abandon her, as you did do. And also, like, she doesn't get that she wasn't anything but the victim. She knows that she just misremembered. She didn't lie. So, like, why is everyone freaking out? To her, it's like, you're actually not believing what happened to me is what it sounds like more. You know, so there's, like, this whole other dynamic happening. And this idea that, like, we can do this if Brynn figures out what she did wrong. It's like that same need for scapegoating. It's like, actually, you all need to figure out what's going on with you all. And in fact, Brynn and Ubah are the two that I feel like are the least responsible.
You need to look at yourselves and the role that you have played in this group dynamic, which I think they all could and should take a hard look at themselves.
Exactly. And look at the need for scapegoating, right? Like, there is a need for gossip because gossip isn't gossip. Gossip is women's talk. Absolutely, there's a need for that. The way you talk about someone doesn't need to be nasty. You can say something like, I'm just worried for Jessel that she feels this way because, wow, how hard would that be to be married to someone that's not the love of your life? That's wildly different, right? Than saying, like, wow, she said she's, you know, so, like, there's a way to talk about relationships and not have it be nasty. And in fact, have it be generative and, like, progressive and helping your relationships with people. And that's where they need to move. You don't need to scapegoat someone to have a relationship with someone else. You can have a relationship with someone else by talking about relationships with other people in a caring, loving way. Like, what a gift, you know? Does it make great TV? Frankly, probably not. But then that's something that we all need to see, you know? Like, we all need to see examples of that. There are examples of that. Let's do more of that if we can. I see some of that in Real Housewives of Beverly Hills where there are moments that people can do that. Erica is somebody who does that. So I think that's where we need to head. Sai tells us as well, she lied as a child for attention. Hate that. To hide things happening in her family, so she never learned how to stop doing that. So that's the last example of just some serious ableism in Sai's speech that just, again, is wrong, misplaced. A lot of reasons children lie, it's not to just get attention. If it is to get attention, it's not to get attention. You know, it's because they need attention. So, anyway. I was a little ranty today, I noticed. I didn't plan on being.
Good.
Like, my mental health checkup, I'm very, like, measured and like, okay, so here's the things. But, like, you know, once we got started talking, I was like, listen to this. Here's my thought on this.
Let's fucking
go. I have a lot to say. Yeah. But what a delay.
Really, really nuanced. And I'm so glad we had the chance to talk about this today.
Exactly. It's not a delightful scenario, just to be clear. It's not delightful at all. It was delightful to talk about it with you and to feel like-minded, because hearing the podcast and the TikToks, and I just was like, I like kept saying to my husband, like, what the fuck? And he also was like, whoa. You know, he was hearing certain things in the show. He's like, whoa. You know, I'm like, me too. What's happening? So to feel like there's other people who are also agreeing with us and not feel like it's just insulated in our house is just really nice. So what a joy. And I hope other people are getting an experience from listening to us as well. I think victims of sexual violence can probably relate quite heavily to Brynn. I, as someone as a survivor of sexual violence who went through trauma work that changed my life and is why I do this work, definitely can relate to a lot of the core belief stuff or things that she's going through. And it's just it's heartbreaking to see the level of re-traumatization that's happening and that she's all alone. And I think I heard she wrote an interview with Rolling Stones. I didn't read it. I want to read it. But I actually heard, again, like denigrating things about it, which obviously is just a product of how people are seeing her. But I wanted to not read it before doing these so that I could come in with just a fresh mind. But it says a lot about how she's trying her best to kind of have a voice in this, right? Like, because she's voiceless. It's just heartbreaking.
It's so sad. Brynn and Ubah, we care about you both. And
exactly.
More than anything, we're sad that this happened. And we hope that you all can find a path forward.
Exactly. And that's the thesis of my mental health checkup that I come to at the end. Like, the truth is, the real way forward is for all of us to come together. There are no sides. The patriarchy is winning by us creating these divisions and deciding that Ubah versus Brynn, and that they need to fight with each other. Like, you can care about both sides because there are no sides. That's where we should be. We should be caring about both of their experiences as women, as humans. And then that can help them do the same for each other. And I think they do that for each other. Like, they have that part of their bodies. It's just not in play right now because of the way they're talked about from the other women about the other. You know, the scapegoating is just really creating divisions that don't need to be there. And it is literally like textbook patriarchy winning. So
That
ideally, we can move
sucks.
towards understanding everybody's context and having forgiveness and love. Not easy necessarily, but definitely the way forward. So
Love that.
I know we're way over time. Check out our social media at Dr. Kay Ray Pods, at Dr. Ray Pods. TikTok is at dr.realitytv, REALITV. Both Facebook and YouTube are at Reality Test Pod. And I would say that our email is realitycheckpodding@gmail.com. And please join our Patreon at patreon.com/realitytest. We're hoping that we have 20 members by 2 weeks from now and hoping to have 50 by a month from now so that we can start donating $10 a month to ACLU.
Yay. Amazing. Download us and we'll see you next session.
Bye, bye, bye.